Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jim Stroud podcast. I'm your host, Jim Stroud, and with me today is a very special guest. Special guest, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you today. My name is Susan Anderson. I am the Chief Services Officer for our HR Solutions Division at Mitratech, which is a software company that builds compliance software and specifically for the HR field. I have
Okay.
about 20 years of experience prior to joining the software industry in management consulting, so I find it really interesting to bring culture and transformative processes all the way down to our HR business users that take care of their employers across the United States.
Nice, nice. Now you mentioned HR. I'm sort of wondering with AI, do we really need HR anymore? Because AI does everything.
Yeah,
Does AI make HR irrelevant? What do you think?
um, absolutely not. Let me start there. And there's a few different ways I'd like to unpack this question with you. The first is sort of what's sitting right in front of us and the way
Hmm.
that AI can enable our HR teams, make them more efficient, but certainly does not replace their work. And I see this every day, specifically around compliance. One of our solutions helps businesses across the United States navigate, understand their obligations for, and execute activities around compliance. And as you and our listeners probably know, the landscape of compliance across the United States is multiply complex when you layer local legislation with state and federal. And what we're starting to see with our customers is an over reliance on AI and the accuracy that it can provide as we navigate really complex compliance situations. And so we've had some customers that feel like their managers, for example, are not coming to them with the right kinds of questions, relying on AI to make really important, impactful business decisions without full context. Termination is an easy example of that.
Sure.
And so, just at the most granular level, HR still plays a really critical role with their managers and their leaders in an organization in taking complex situations. Certainly, AI can augment the conversation and the decision-making process, but I would say very strongly, final decisions, interpretation of situations need to reside with the HR experts that have the right context for a given situation. So that's sort of an easy way to answer that question. If I look at it more provocatively,
Mm.
several months ago, the HR field was a little bit a Twitter on the actions of Ryan Breslow, who was the CEO of Bolt. And he said publicly, both on LinkedIn and at a major conference, that he didn't need HR. And contextually, Ryan was brought back after Bolt had really tumbled in value and was doing a significant restructure. And he was seeing and saying that HR was creating problems that just didn't exist. And so he publicly made, a big statement about not needing HR and then promptly stood up people operations team focusing on a lot of the activities that HR has always and traditionally done. And there was some criticism around, this was just, a way to reinstitute HR, calling it something different and having it focusing on the execution, particularly around training, which, absolutely is an important function of our HR organizations. And, what I would say in that moment is that was when we see, the compliance and the bureaucracy bad rap that HR gets, and not recognizing that HR plays a much, much more critical role within the organization around building culture, helping with organizations, creating psychological safety, and being an advocate both for the business and for the employees. So, that's sort of an opposite end of the spectrum. And, I have a lot more thoughts about that, but I want to give you an opportunity to steer the conversation.
I like it. I like your thoughts. The one thing that I've always sort of pushed back on when people say, we have AI, we don't need HR anymore. Somebody has to be responsible, accountable at some level. Terminations especially. To your point, if someone just gets fired, they're not gonna. They may be offended by that. They may
Mhm.
want to sue over that. And so, what can a company say? Well, the AI told us to fire.
Mm.
to fire this person, blame the AI. I don't
Yeah.
think that would fly in court though.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, the federal government's been very clear that when AI tools are in place, the decision making and the accountability still resides with the humans. And I don't think that'll ever change. I think that it is super tempting on all levels to work with these tools that sound really confident. They feel like the answer that they're giving is right. And what I encourage within our own organization and with my team is to really push on all angles to bring extreme human judgment and curiosity, but also skepticism in working with these tools. They're designed to tell you what you want to hear. And so our best human skills are to be litigators when we're working with these tools and ultimately being accountable for the outcome and the decision making that you're using these tools for.
What if someone is listening or they see these different headlines like Mobley versus Workday, which is a big
Hmm.
lawsuit going on right now, and these other lawsuits or potential lawsuits out there, and they're thinking, you know what, back in my day, we didn't have all this and we still got it done. So, what do you say to those people who are thinking, maybe I don't need all this AI stuff, maybe I don't need all this technology, to bring back the pad and pencil? Uh,
Yeah,
what do you say to those folks?
I think there's a happy medium.
Mm,
And our leaders in the middle parts of the organization are under this impossible situation. And let me just take this analogy a little further.
sure.
Take our HR leaders in an organization. I have seen this both in the press with customers that we've worked with and in our own organization, tremendous pressure from the board and from executive leaders to keep up with the Joneses and implement these tools because everyone else is. And certainly it should be driving tremendous amounts of efficiency. So why haven't you fired a third of the staff yet? And that pressure is real. And I think it's really common for leaders in this moment to feel like they're behind and that they're not doing the things that they need to do. And it is acting out of this fear that I think we make short-sighted decisions about the next steps. And I would argue, play the long game is far more better for building the organization of the future. And let me go back to your question.
Sure.
The the pressure coming from the top for sure to use these tools. And then there's friction at the bottom. There's lack of trust of these tools by many of the end users in an organization who are being asked to work more efficiently, work faster. We all know and probably have read the headlines that, one person at the front end of the food chain, if you will, of a process using AI in an irresponsible manner, work slop is the official term for it,
Yeah.
you know, does something that feels fast, it feels magical, and then they pass that down to the next person in the row who has to step back. And if they're applying their good human critical thinking, recognizing it for what it is, which is ineffective, maybe incomplete, potentially misleading, and having to redo that work. And so that reinforces that I just want to go back to pen and paper and doing it the old way. And
Right.
I think there is something in the middle. I think it requires an organization to really take a pause, make sure that the humans in the organization understand not only how do these things work, because understanding the fact that these are just pattern recognition machines, they're not actually smart. And certainly the models are getting better, they're performing better, but there's still a risk of not applying critical skills and critical thinking when you're using these tools to create outcomes that are really meaningful. There can be significant efficiencies or quality improvement. These are the two things that when I'm working with my teams using, generative AI in particular,
Mm,
leaning in on, is this making you faster in the long run, or is this making the quality of the work that you're doing better? Whether that's decision support, whether that's content generation, whether that's, taking large amounts of data and being able to quickly and effectively pull insights and analysis. There's a lot of really strong use cases. I don't know a single HR manager out there that wants to go read 2,000 employee feedback forms where
Right.
AI can, in that use case, be very effective at eliciting themes, summarizing context, and providing quotes that support those contexts. So I think it's a happy medium.
That's interesting. Do you think that, and I just thought about this as you were saying that there HR produces employee handbooks, different
Mhm.
rules of engagement for work. I have yet to hear of a company create a rules of engagement for AI. Do you think that's the next big trend? Because people are talking about it, but it seems like no one really has any hard, fast rules of this is exactly how you should use AI in the workplace. Have you
Yeah,
seen that yet?
I have, and it's the side of my desk project that I've been running over the last 3 years. I've gotten to be at the forefront of implementing AI tooling across our company.
Hmm.
And it was a side hack that I had because I was so passionate about it. And where we started, everyone's learning this together. And again, it's easy to feel like you're behind, but I would say, where everyone really started was risk control. You saw corporate legal teams getting involved in policy writing along with IT, SecOps, security and cybersecurity teams were very concerned about data exposure. Early on, we had a lot of use cases where, IP was getting out into the wild, and you're
Yeah.
losing, a lot of value there. So it started out very much as a stick. And those policies, were typically standalone. You saw a lot of templates out there of AI leaders sharing examples of what they were. And where I was excited to see many companies move, ourselves included, was more around storytelling around what was appropriate and why, and sort of less of the stick and the rules, but really helping people understand why it was important and how to operate with these tools. And in the playbook or the policy manual or the AI manual, like you talk about, I think is a combination of um, building awareness and skill sets. So that's understanding how they work. I start all of my AI journeys with employees around understanding how the technology works at the most granular levels. We
Hmm.
make that fun. We gamify it. Like I have, all kinds of Kahoot games that we've played to help people learn the basics. And then it's generic use cases. So how do you use it for common decision support? What good, what bad looks like. And in fact, for each of the business functions, I would say best practice companies are taking it down to their functional leaders and having them work with their teams to understand, like, this is how we use it for our functions. These are the business use cases that have been proven out that have good value. This is how we encourage innovation. And part of our playbook is celebrating failure and doing so publicly. We do that because it's important to support a psychologically safe organization, where people feel comfortable experimenting and innovating in in knowing what to do that in a safe ways. Again, back to that sort of playbook around AI and then specifically highlighting massively successful use cases across the entire company because that sharing of what worked and what doesn't work, creates a little bit of a flywheel where that'll spur somebody else's ideas and then they can go and innovate. The pace of this is frankly amazing.
It truly is.
And
Yeah.
the playbook really has to be around, I think, building skills and awareness, communicating your guardrails, empowering your functional leaders to really execute, at the department or the function level, and then publicly celebrating those successes to continue, building that across the organization.
I sort of wonder, and I saw a news report about this, an article about this the other day, where there was the fear that AI is taking all the jobs away. And
Mm.
then because you can do so much with AI, that now there's a concern that you will be doing the work of three people or five people because you have AI to back you up. Do you think that's going to be a trend where the average employee is going to do the work of three or four employees because they have AI tools and they're expected to maintain a certain level of product
Yeah.
output because they have AI there?
Yeah, thanks for that hot potato. This one is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a natural tension between sort of, I would call it big business wanting to maximize profits. On the one hand, there's this, expectation of 40 hours. You're going to do 40 hours of productivity. Certainly, we would love to say that jobs are outcome based and you work the hours that you need, for, our exempt employees. But the reality is that the pace of work coming from, like I mentioned, that upstream piece, more volume is coming in, rework is having to happen. And I don't see a future where we get to kick back and say, this was my job before, I can do the job now in 30 hours, therefore my 30-hour work week just became a reality. I think um, when productivity increases on one end of the funnel, that productivity, sort of compounds. If anything, I think um, we're finding that um, not only is the day-to-day work compressing, but the
Hmm.
push for innovation, the push for can you do more? Can you do more? It feels visceral, at least in the software industry in which I work.
That brings another question to mind. And I don't know. Let me just get your opinion on this because I know you're not the salary person, but let's say AI helps you be more productive. You're doing more with less. Instead of working 40 hours to your point, you're working 30 hours. Should that be reflected in your pay? And if so, how? That could it be that you improve things, so we're going to give you a raise and pay you more money, even though you're working less
Mm,
hours? Or do we pay you less money because you're actually working less hours because of AI?
yeah.
How do you answer that?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I've always been a big believer in paying people for creative ways of bringing forward solutions to
Mm.
do to create more value. And so at the end of the day, I would like to see a future where we're paying individuals for the value in which they're creating. Um, if I have a performer who thinks outside of the box and reconstructs the way they do work in a way that is more efficient, and the organization can learn from that, I think with that person should be rewarded. I know that probably feels like a Pollyanna situation, and um, role design and job design is really at the heart of what we've got to solve for first.
Sure.
And I think this really leads us into a conversation about agents, and you take AI, one step further and you're building agents, and these agents can perform routine tasks on a person's behalf. And if I have an employee who has created three agents, to take tasks off their plate, and they're able to maintain those agents, they can prove that those agents have the right guardrails and the right quality output. But then suddenly this individual, the impact that they have increases, I think they should be paid accordingly.
Do you think that these AI agents that are all the rage these days, should they be classified as workers with privileges and benefits thereof?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. This is a hot button for me. I was at
Mm.
HR Tech last year, and I think in that moment, there were so many things going on across the field of HR and the intersection of technology that empowers HR. And I think there was one narrative which was it's very risky. I think we were seeing a lot of negative outcomes where AI was going a little rogue. There was a lot of early experimentation around recruiting. I mean, talent acquisition was the
Sure.
logical place where AI could play a really powerful role. But I think everybody was scratching their heads because, yeah, the HR hiring process was getting more efficient, but so were the applicants, like just the deluge of,
Yeah.
custom, and so that was one thing that was happening. But the other thing that was happening that I really strongly disagree with is I heard more than one person get up on a stage and say AI agents are replacing the work of humans. They are working autonomously. They have a scope, they have a job description, they have KPIs. Therefore, they are like an autonomous worker, and HR should own these workers. And it should be the purview of HR that they're accountable for um, designing and managing these agents as pseudo employees. And I scratched my head at that. I felt like that was the wrong direction to take HR for a couple of reasons. Number one, I could liken this to the same sort of transformation that's happened across industries, going hundreds of years back, but specifically just take robotics, in the automotive industry. Um, when when robotic technology came online, it replaced the work of humans. It had processes it adhered to. It had KPIs and metrics that were measured, and no one thought that HR should own the robots that were doing, the manufacturing. I think strongly functional business owners need to be at the table thinking about their processes completely differently,
Mm.
building AI agents and that can improve the way work flows through the organization. I think the business owners need to own those agents, but HR plays a critical role. And this is where I think sort of leveling up can and should happen. In the age of AI, HR plays a critical role in partnering with their business partners specifically to understand how to reimagine how work gets done, humans alongside the technology, and being really clear on having humans at the table to design both processes, the automation steps. That's going to redefine roles. That's going to redefine job descriptions for the humans, the metrics that we're measuring those humans against. And this is, at the end of the day, I think this is a great opportunity for HR to be at the table with their org design hat on, partnering with the business to reimagine how work gets done.
That's interesting. I'm coming at you from a different angle. Same kind of argument. There's a term called algorithmic management, where an AI is actually managing the workers. An
Mm,
example of that is if you're an Uber driver. And if you are familiar with Uber, when you're driving, you get certain alerts that say that we're now going to have surge pricing. So if you go to the airport now and pick people up, you get 10% more of the money back, 10% more of your service fees or whatever. And same thing if you do Uber Eats or deliver stuff like that. Some
mhm.
machine is telling you go to this area and deliver now, and you make more money. So the machine is really managing the people. How do you feel about that? Do you see that beyond Uber, or you said it just exclusively for that kind of thing? I mean,
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
I probably would
Because they're
interpret
doing that
this.
now. They're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
that
yeah.
now. Yeah.
I I think this is data and insight that's provided by an AI that helps a human make a decision. That Uber driver does not have to go to the airport. They're incented to, for sure, based on the
Hmm.
business conditions that exist. I don't see that as managing the human. It certainly is, providing visibility and insight into ways that they can maximize their own performance. But that AI is not writing their performance review and docking their pay or kicking them off the platform necessarily. I think anytime that there's the word management, and I would take that to mean performance management,
Mm.
I think there will always need to be a human in the loop, a human that is making those final decisions. Certainly, AI tools are great at assembling large pieces of data, or even if that's around performance management, and compiling those and providing insights. But it's up to the human still to make performance related decisions, whether that's a review, whether that's coaching and feedback, whether that is a promotion or anything that impacts pay. I would be wary of a future where we have AI doing those tasks unsupervised.
I think I'm hearing from you that you're a proponent of transparency. You want companies to just say that AI is doing this, that, and the other. I can see how that would benefit the worker in that, for example, if they apply for a job and they didn't get the job or they got automatically rejected 6 seconds after they
Mm,
applied, they can say, yeah, that's an AI. But I can see how that might not necessarily benefit companies because if somebody can apply for a job and they get rejected in 6 seconds, they're going to complain. One person doing it, eh. But if everybody's doing it at the same time, now the company has a headache.
mhm.
And now they're trying to evaluate, is this an HR tech company problem? Is this a process problem? What am I going to do? How do you feel about that? How would you advise a company in that regard?
Yeah. I love that you brought up transparency. That's
Yeah.
something I didn't mention before when we were talking about our AI playbook. I do think that when there are tools within an organization that are AI powered that employees need to know. And I'm a big proponent, and I've even spoken about this at SHRM, that the responsibility of the organization is to be transparent about how AI is working, how decisions or how it's, programmed to make decisions or to make recommendations, and where human in the loop plays a role. The same goes for the candidate experience. I think that if there are rules and decision criteria in the applicant flow process where an AI is able to make a 6-second decision, the transparency of how that decision was made should be easily available to the candidate. Do they not meet a certain criteria in the application? Did they, if it's a 6-second decision, clearly there was some, minimum criteria threshold that wasn't met. And yeah, companies should be really transparent about that. And I do think that, the candidate experience with these tools it's an extension of the company brand. And if you want to start with fostering psychological safety, fostering trust, fostering, a worker-centered experience, that begins with that recruiting experience.
Last question for you. All that being said, should that be a law, or should that be something that the company just takes upon itself to do because they want to be competitive and attract the best talent? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think legislating these AI tools is a whole nother podcast for us. I don't believe that should be, a law per se around, the specific mechanics of how that transparency exists. I think it should be an industry standard. And yes, down to the employer. I think the employer can titrate, just how transparent they want to be. One size doesn't fit all, in this situation. But I do think as pressure that we put upon ourselves as HR tech leaders, we should be leading with, transparency in how these tools act.
Wow. Wow. Very good insight. I feel like we can go on and on, but I can't keep you here forever. If somebody had a question about what we've talked about or want to get in contact with you specifically, how can they find you online?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat today. It was really fun. Best way to contact me is through LinkedIn. I'll give you the link down in the comments.
All right, very good. Thank you so much for being on the Jim Stroud podcast. You are appreciated. Well, my time is up. I thank you for yours. I'll see you again real soon right here with a brand new episode of the Jim Stroud podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached by email at jimstroud@jimstroud.com. And one last favor, if I may ask, please rate this podcast. 5 stars is preferred, but please comment with your honest opinion. I really appreciate that. All right? Okay, until next time, bye-bye.